What if I told you that some of the NBA's biggest names are having their worst seasons ever? Not just a bad game or two. We're talking about career-altering slumps that could change the future of multiple franchises. And after diving deep into the numbers, what I found was even more shocking than I expected. So buckle up, because we're about to break down the most unexpected performance drops of 2025, and trust me, some of these will completely change how you view certain players. Before we get into this breakdown, take a second to hit that subscribe button, because you're about to see why these performance shifts matter way more than most people realize. Let's start with something that nobody saw coming. Remember when Bam Adebayo was supposed to be Miami's future? When he got that massive extension, everyone thought it was a steal. The keys to the city, Team USA selection, the defensive anchor that was supposed to carry Miami into its next era. Fast forward to 2025, and things look different. We're talking about a center. Yes, a center, shooting just 45% from the field. To put that in perspective, that's worse than some guards. For comparison, in 2023, the average shooting guard hit 46% of their shots. The center shooting below that. That's not just disappointing. That's historically bad. And here's what makes it even worse. Bam's not just struggling offensively. Those defensive metrics that used to put him in the conversation for Defensive Player of the Year, they've fallen off a cliff. Looking at the advanced stats, Bam's defensive impact metrics have dropped so far that he's now behind players like Evan Mobley, Jaren Jackson Jr., and even Lou Dort.
USA Basketball has now won 5 consecutive Olympic titles dating back to
Think about that for a second. We're talking about someone who was supposed to be the best defender in the league, now struggling to crack the top 5 in his own position. But Miami's problems don't stop there. The Jimmy Butler situation has turned into something nobody could have predicted. From finals hero to, well, let's just say things have gotten complicated in South Beach. The reports about Phoenix aren't just rumors anymore. They're symptoms of a deeper problem. When your franchise player starts missing games and the team suspends him, that's when you know something's seriously wrong. Now, most people would look at these situations and think they're isolated incidents. But here's where it gets interesting. This pattern of unexpected decline isn't just happening in Miami. It's spreading across the league like wildfire. Take Scoot Henderson in Portland. Everyone expected him to struggle initially. That's normal for rookies. But what's happening now is different. Yes, he had that incredible 39-point explosion against Brooklyn. Everyone remembers those 8 threes, the perfect free throw shooting. But here's what they're not telling you. In the very next game, Brooklyn lost by 59 points to the Clippers. That kind of puts that performance in perspective, doesn't it? And speaking of perspective, let's talk about what's happening in San Antonio. While everyone's been focused on Wemby's highlight reel, there's another story that needs to be told. Devin Vassell's regression might be one of the most underreported stories of 2025. His numbers are down across the board, from 19.5 to 15.8 points per game. But it's not just the scoring. His efficiency has tanked. And here's the crazy part. He's getting more open looks than ever before thanks to Wemby drawing double teams. Now, let's talk money. Because when you add contract numbers to these performance drops, things get really interesting. The Chicago Bulls gave Patrick Williams $90 million. That's not just a number. That's a commitment that runs until 2029. And what are they getting for that money? 9.4 points per game. For rebounds, under a steal per night, in 27 minutes of playing time. To put that in perspective, there are players on minimum contracts putting up better numbers. But if you think that's bad, wait until you hear about what's happening in Orlando with KCP. When you're paying $22 million for veteran leadership and shooting, you expect certain things. What you don't expect is watching your prized free agent acquisition shoot 31% from 3. These aren't just bad numbers. They're historically bad for someone brought in specifically for their shooting. Now, let's talk about something that's becoming a pattern in the NBA, the post-extension slump. Remember when getting paid was supposed to help players play more freely? Well, 2025 is challenging that theory. Just look at Jaden McDaniels in Minnesota. After getting that massive extension, his shooting percentages have dropped to career lows. We're talking 44% from the field for a player who's supposed to be taking the next step. And here's where things get really interesting. The Philadelphia 76ers situation might be the most fascinating case study of all. Joel Embiid, the reigning MVP, has played just 13 games. Paul George, their $200 million man, is averaging 17 points on 42% shooting. This isn't just about injuries or bad luck anymore. This is about the fundamental way teams build their rosters. Remember when the Warriors were the gold standard for player development? Well, Brandon Podziemski's regression tells a different story. His three-point percentage has dropped from 38% to 29%. That might not sound dramatic until you realize this is happening in the same system that turned Jordan Poole into a $100 million player. Let's talk about big men for a minute, because what's happening with centers in 2025 is unprecedented. DeAndre Ayton in Portland has gone from former #1 pick to struggling to keep his starting spot. Nick Claxton got his big contract in Brooklyn and immediately saw his numbers drop across the board. Even Jaren Jackson Jr., who was supposed to take another leap this year, has plateaued. But here's what makes all of this so fascinating. It's not just about individual players struggling. We're watching a league-wide shift in how teams evaluate talent, how they develop players, and most importantly, how they build for the future. Think about it. When former All-Stars and promising young players are both struggling to maintain consistency, how do you value potential versus production? The ripple effects of these performance drops are already changing how teams approach everything from draft strategy to contract negotiations. The Blazers' struggles with young talent development might make other teams more hesitant to fully commit to rebuilds. The Heat's culture clash could influence how other organizations approach veteran leadership. And here's something nobody's talking about: the psychological impact of these struggles. When you're a young player watching former All-Stars struggle, when you see big contracts not translating to big performances, it changes how you approach your own development. We're not just watching statistics drop, we're watching the entire NBA ecosystem evolve in real time. Looking ahead, these performance shifts raise some fascinating questions. Are we witnessing temporary setbacks? Or is this the beginning of a fundamental change in how NBA careers develop? When teams look at these struggles, how will it affect their willingness to give out massive extensions? Will we see more conservative approaches to player development? The most intriguing part of all this isn't just who's struggling. It's what these struggles tell us about the changing nature of success in the NBA. The league has always been unpredictable, but 2025 is teaching us new lessons about how quickly fortunes can change, how fragile potential can be, and how even the surest bets in basketball can suddenly become question marks. So here's my question for you. Which of these performance drops shocked you the most? Drop a comment below and let me know. And if you want to stay updated on how these situations develop, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Because trust me, with the way this season is going, you won't want to miss what happens next. And one more thing before you go. I've got another video coming up about the teams that could potentially benefit from all these struggling players. You won't want to miss that one. So stay tuned.